Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Athena Film Festival and this panel on social media and branding for filmmakers, which will introduce you to the latest tools and strategies for creating successful promotional and social media campaigns for your films. My name is Maya Hamlet, and I'm a sophomore here at Barnard and an Athena Center intern. On behalf of the Athena Center for Leadership Studies and Women in Hollywood, I want to thank you for joining us and hope that you are enjoying the festival. We would not have been able to produce this festival without our sponsors. There's a list of them in your programs if you would like to see their names. I want to give a special thanks to the Artemis Rising Foundation and the CEO and founder, Regina K. Scully. Tickets are still available for our great lineup of films and panels, and we hope you will join us for other screenings and panels this weekend. In addition, I want to thank Advanced TV, Her Story, and Cynthia Bemis Abrams, who has sponsored this panel. Cynthia is the CEO of Advanced TV Her Story and is here this afternoon and would like to say a few words of welcome. Cynthia?
Welcome, everybody. You're going to have a chance to talk about probably one of the most important aspects of filmmaking, but really of all aspects of women in entertainment today, because the social media and the branding conversation that you're going to have and learn a little bit more about from the film industry also applies to podcasting, also applies to TV, to radio, to everything else. So this notion and this passion that you have about the representation of women in media, whatever that media is, and print, is founded on a set of skills and a perspective that you are unique to have, and you're growing here today. So I am grateful that this is a full room, and it's one that's going to learn even more, advance yourselves further to be able to walk into any industry and begin telling the stories of the storytellers that want to work with you and that you want to work with. And what a fascinating area that did not exist 10 years ago. What a powerful arena that social media is today that can take a headline that just happened yesterday and it becomes part of a swing movement. I am convinced that this is perhaps the most powerful time of social change that we're experiencing since 1969. And it is occurring with the passion and the motion of literally 7 decades of women who have been waiting for this to happen. So anybody who is engaged on the social media front is really part of making that happen, making those words matter, and making the point of representation. So I encourage you, whatever your age, know that you will come away smarter. You're going to better understand the tools and be able to think through from a practical perspective how the tools match the theory, meet the goals. So thank you very much. Advanced TV Herstory also can be found at tvherstory.com, available however you download your podcasts. And please, if you know of women who are interested in hearing the stories of women on TV, the leadership and the persistence and the achievement of really, really phenomenal, talented women, but don't know how to access a podcast, this is your chance to have even greater value to an older woman in your life, or an older man. So thank you very much. Enjoy this session.
So I would like to now turn things over to Darcy Husel, the moderator of today's panel, who will introduce us to our panelists and begin what promises to be a great conversation. Darcy.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to sit. This is on? Okay. I'm just going to introduce our panelists really quickly so they can come up. We can all be here together. The first panelist, actually, in no particular order, is Kristen McCracken. She is a social media consultant and strategist. She's worked at the Tribeca Film Festival and with numerous filmmakers. We have Christina Raya. She's run 4 of her own successful crowdfunding campaigns, and she is the director of crowdfunding at Seed and Spark. And last, we have Tanya Selvaratnam. She is a producer for Planned Parenthood and for Glamour. She produces their social media content. She's also a filmmaker and an activist. Really quickly before you start, I just wanted to see a show of hands of who's a filmmaker here, just so we have a sense of how many people want to use social media for the filmmaking. Great, so we have a crowd of filmmakers here. So I want this, we only have an hour, and I'm going to leave about half of it for audience questions, because I think your questions about social media are probably more important than some of the questions that I'm going to ask them. I'm sure yours will be, really nitty and gritty. But first, I just briefly introduced them, but I wanted to just quickly hear from each of you, how you got started in social media as an introduction.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kristen. I went to work at the Tribeca Film Festival in the summer of 2008, and I was hired to run the website and do the content for the website. And then social media happened that fall, and they kind of pointed at me and said, figure it out. And so so I did, as most people who got started in social media did. We all just kind of figured it out. And I worked there for the next 4.5 years, and I built up Tribeca's year-round social media presence. And then when I left, really the niche that I found for myself was that people were nervous about social media. They knew how to do it for themselves, but not for a project or for a company or whatever else. And so I really kind of found myself in a position to create a business to work with filmmakers. And then I also started to work with smaller film festivals. So now I work for 4 or 5 film festivals each year. And I also fill in working with filmmakers around a release, either a festival premiere or a theatrical release or a DVD, VOD release. So that's what I do now, and it's fun. I like talking about it, so I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Christina Rea. I'm a filmmaker, and so when I was in school, I feel like I was taught a very kind of old way of getting films made, and really a system that wasn't designed to support me as a woman filmmaker and a minority filmmaker. And so when I came out of school and wanted to get into the world of making content, I realized that there really wasn't a path for me to take. There weren't opportunities. No one was going to come knocking on my door. So I started experimenting with social media and realized that I needed to find the people who wanted to see the content that I wanted to make. And so that's how really I got started in social media, and I started crowdfunding and realized that I could make my content through the people who wanted to see it because they wanted to feel part of it. And that's really how social media has become such a part of my career. And I started speaking on panels after my second crowdfunding campaign for my first feature, and I met the CEO of Seed and Spark, Emily Best, and I kind of connected with them and was brought on board as the director of crowdfunding, and now I help filmmakers launch their own campaigns and kind of educate them about social media and the sort of empowering nature of that.
So I'm Tanya Selvaratnam, and I don't like social media. In the early noughts, I got on all the platforms. Back then it was Friendster, MySpace, and Facebook, and I deleted all my accounts around 2007 because I'm an in-person person. But as a filmmaker and a storyteller and an artist, I recognize and value the importance of using social media to reach people. Because as an artist, my greatest fear is that nobody sees my work. And also, it's incredibly important because I work with so many social justice organizations, and especially recently with Planned Parenthood, I launched a campaign for them last month on the anniversary of the Women's March called Unstoppable. And the point is that women are leading the resistance, the revolution, and the reckoning, and that when we march together, when we vote together, when we lead together, and when we have each other's backs, we are unstoppable. And I feel like using social media to convey that message and connect with people is really the way to go. And I really love short-form content. That's what I've really crafted over the last 10 years, how to tell a story in 5 minutes or less. And I'm excited to learn more here today.
I think we all sort of share your love-hate feelings around social media. I know I do, many days. One of the things I always like to talk about is, the failures, because I think we learn a lot from them. And I think it's perfect in terms of social media. You can sometimes know, when it's working. You can see, with Black Panther and the Women's March and many, different issues, when social media works really well, what success looks like. But I would curious to hear from you guys, what is one thing that filmmakers often get wrong about social media?
Sure. So I think filmmakers tend to share. It's a lot of like, oh, I made this thing, or here's a behind-the-scenes photo. It's a lot of just sharing. And really what social media should be about is engagement and interaction. And so, when I'm planning to promote a project or I'm, going to be running a crowdfunding campaign, something that I do before I really start talking about the project is identifying people online who are already having this conversation, the conversation that revolves around the content that I'm making. For instance, I do a lot of LGBTQ inclusive work, so I go online and I look for the people that are talking about the lack of content that exists or what they want out of that content, or just that are generally fans of the content that's similar to what I'm planning to make, and I engage them. And so that you actually have people, you want to have people that will respond to what you're posting. And I think that that's a big mistake, is that filmmakers just kind of get online and just start sharing with nobody.
Yeah, I find what they, there's so much that could be done if filmmakers think more strategically about how they're releasing their content. And also, being a great filmmaker does not necessarily mean that you're going to be a success on social media. It's a very specific type of storytelling. And the thing that I find filmmakers tend to get wrong is it's basic things, like you need to grab people in the first 5 seconds, show them a human face, show them somebody speaking. You don't need the establishing shot, things like that. And then also just sort of technical things, like you're going to get more engagement and views if you do native posts rather than shared posts. Things like, the very basic things. And one thing that I do is I've been coordinating artists through a coalition I have called the Federation that's committed to keeping cultural borders open. And then also during the election cycle, I was coordinating artists all around the country to generate content to get out the vote. And what I do is I put together a toolkit and just give people tips on how to make successful social media content and how also to strategize for getting it out there.
And this is a basic question, but when you say content, what are you guys referring to? Like, what kind of content works? Posts, videos, sharing personal stories, or just share a little bit about the content you post and recommend people post.
So when I work with film festivals, I think about engagement all year long, so it's not just the month around the festival. So you try to, so when a film comes through a festival, you want to make sure that you're sharing that film when it comes out into the world. You want that kind of content. But your goal in any social media really should be the key equation that I always remember is that shares are greater than comments are greater than likes. So you're always looking to find the content that people will want to share, whether that's inspiring or interesting or just fun, whatever. There's a lot of ways to go about that, but you can't set out to make something viral, but you should always try to think about things that people will want to share. And one thing that I think that people forget so often is to use each platform to its best potential. So you never, ever, ever have those automatic cross posts where it goes from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram, whatever. You don't want that, because I guarantee you, no one on Twitter has ever clicked on a Facebook link that goes to Facebook. Like, use Twitter for what it's worth. It's now 280 characters. You can do a little more with it. You can have video. You need to find out you can talk more about the video content stuff, but on Instagram, a video can't be more than a minute, right? And does Twitter have those kinds of restrictions? I can't remember. Yeah, there's some restrictions. But and now you can use on Facebook, you can also have a cover photo that's a video now, as long as it's under a minute and a half, I think it is, or something like that. But there's a lot of, you should always think about things you want to share and that people will want to share. And you also want to think about your audience and giving them something. Like you were talking about, you don't just want to keep saying, I made a movie, I made a movie, I made a movie, I made a movie. You should see it. Like, you want to think about who your audience is and what kinds of content they will want to know. So if I start working on a new documentary, I look at the issues in the film. I set up Google keywords so that I get notifications of things that come up on the internet that are related to that issue or that topic. And then I'll look through each day. You get like a digest from the day of what things have been published in the last 24 hours that are related to your topic. And then you think about what kinds of things you want to share with your audience, so you become a resource. And it's not just like a one-way communication, just throwing your information out to them. You're trying to give them something to start a conversation. And then you always want to remember that social media is social, and that people, if they ask you questions, you need to answer them and talk back and forth and make it a two-way conversation in a community. That was a lot.
No, that was really great, really helpful.
No, yeah, that was great. Everything, all of that. For my projects, and also I encourage other filmmakers to kind of have a mix of building the world that the film exists in, as you said, finding content, articles and stuff that's relevant to put out, but also, behind the scenes stuff. And I'm for me, I tend to start promoting a project long before we've shot any of it, before it really exists. And I try to be as visual as possible. And a big part of that is like every milestone is some kind of video or at least a photo. So I'll do, location scout videos and photos. I'll do meet the cast videos where, the actor gets on screen and talks about who they are and who their character is and, why they want to be part of this project. I will do, meet the crew. The crew tends to be a little bit more camera shy, but maybe I'll share a photo of them and kind of write about their background and their skills. But I think that people, especially your audience, because you're not just, friend and family targeting, and you're trying to find people who ideally, I think that filmmakers can be your fans and are, obviously. I mean, I love content. I'm a filmmaker, but I also love watching movies. But you want to reach people that don't make movies, and part of that is like giving them an inside look behind the scenes of making a movie. What does that mean? What do the positions mean? What is a gaffer? And I think that I find a lot of response with people from that because they learn and they're engaged and it's interesting.
And if you don't start your social media at the begin, like way back when, start collecting that content at least, and just have a folder on your hard drive, on your desktop that's like, content for social, so that later you can go back and use those. When I come on board to work with a film, when it's coming out in the world, that's my dream, is to have that kind of content to start sharing and ramping up, even if you didn't do it at the far end beginning, before you.
And that's really critical. I work for a distribution company, and we, acquire people's films, and the more content that they have, even set stills, costumes, funny stories, all that stuff, helps build out the social media campaign that you need to last, from the time you release a trailer to, the time it goes on DVD and iTunes and all of those places. So the more content you can collect, even if you are not an expert in social media, the better. Tanya, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit, and you might not be able to, about the ways in which, when you're producing content, you think about it per platform. Are you thinking about it, for Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Musical.ly and all those other platforms that exist out there?
Well, I am very lucky and wise to bring on people who really do love those platforms to work with me on them. And they are very specific subsets. And it's very important to have a content calendar in advance that's specific to each platform, and to recognize the different ways that people engage with those platforms, and also to recognize that because of the way the algorithms have been set up and evolved, that there's very little chance of organic growth now. And that's unfortunate. But it's and y'all can speak to this as well, but it's very important that you allocate enough resources to have social media promotion. And that is sad. When you see these videos with millions and millions of views, don't assume that that's all natural.
And for all of you, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of budget? Like, how much do you recommend somebody allocate towards, social media advertising?
Well, I can give some tangible numbers. Recently, I spent, it's amazing how little you can spend to get views, and it's really important. I mean, I've learned quite a lot working with people. I'm very lucky. I have people who used to work at Facebook, used to work at Instagram, who are now independent and freelance that I bring on, and I think it's really crucial to have people who've been doing this for a while and are experts in it. And I've learned a lot from them. But, for a few $100s, you can add thousands and thousands of views to your videos. And then there are pages that have huge followings, and you can also pay them to share your content. It's advertising. So when it can be thousands of dollars to do that.
Yeah. So I have one client where I work with this cryptocurrency company that they're setting up this. Anyway, it's a long story, but they have like $10,000 a month that they're giving me to do ads. That is not necessary for the kinds of things that you're doing. When I come on board with a film, I usually ask for, if I'm coming on for like a month or 6 weeks before a premiere of some kind, either a festival or theatrical, I ask for 500 to 1,000. 1,000 would be great if I could have that, but I can do a lot with 500. And I usually kind of allocate that as like 60% to a behind-the-scenes ad to get more page likes on the page, because it's crucial to capture those people so that you have them for long term. I'm not looking for the video views like you're talking about. It's more about building this community that you have to talk to, so that when you have an announcement to make, you're making that announcement to more people. So hand in hand with that, the first thing I ask filmmakers to do is come up with a list of keywords. And those keywords, that's their first assignment. And they can use those keywords as YouTube metadata. They can use those keywords for advertising when you're trying to find your target audience. But I have them think about keywords that are like topics that are related to their film, or characters or actors, whatever, cast, or issues. But then also think about other films that are like their films, where if that person liked that film, they would like your film. So think big, you know, if it's documentary, think a big documentary, but if it's a narrative, whatever, just think about tone. And then I use those keywords to target a potential audience to like the page. And then once we've got them to like the page, and you want slow and steady growth, and you narrow it to the US if that's your audience. You don't want to open it up to the world, because then you'll get a bunch of likes that are not relevant to you. Then once you have those likes, then you can boost then I use the other 40% or so of the budget to boost the post. So when I put a post up, I'll boost it to our fans and their friends. And it can be a $5 boost. It doesn't have to be a $50 boost. But as long as you give Facebook something, they give you love, and then that it starts to show up in more people's feeds. But you have to have a Facebook ad budget. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can spend very little, and it goes a long way. I try to kind of supplement the money I'm spending on ads with the people that I can rely on, and so I think you want to tap your crew and your cast and your sort of core supporters to share and comment, because building an audience benefits everyone who worked on the project, and so there's really no reason why they shouldn't share it with their audience or comment. I try to kind of space things out, so it's like, okay, this week you 3 people are going to share, and then next week when we want to get another boost on it, you guys will comment or share. And so really it's a mix of like money and also just getting people involved.
And you can make it plug and play for them. You can give them things to copy and paste and put it into their social media. I mean, you want them to do it with their own voice, but if they don't, it's better than nothing to have, just tell them exactly how to do it, because they're nervous sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge thing. People want to support you, especially if they weren't part of the project itself. They want to support you, but they don't know what to say. You want to make it super easy for them. Just like copy and paste, here are some options, and tailored to different platforms.
And tell them how to tag. And tell them the difference between a hashtag and a handle. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that you can.
So I see a lot of really young faces in this audience, and so assuming they're young filmmakers, maybe working on their first project, maybe working on their second or third project. And so a question that I get a lot, and I'm not sure about the answer, I'm curious what your answer is do you create accounts per project or per film, or do you recommend that they create it under their own accounts as filmmakers and build that audience?
I have a lot of feelings about this, but do you?
Well, I always create a separate account, not through my personal one, and I think that's the wiser way to do it. But what do you think?
So I think it really depends on who's going to be managing these accounts and the time that person has. I'm a big believer in not spreading yourself too thin. I make a lot of content. I have 2 feature films, I have a web series, I have like 10 short films. And so if I had a handle for every single project, that would be, I would have no time in the day, there would be dead accounts, there would be no incentive for people to follow them. So my strategy is, I do have my personal account, like I have a Twitter account for myself, and that is my voice as a filmmaker. So it's sort of like curating content that I'm a fan of. I do share my own stuff, but I'm also like overtly political on it. I share, my brand as a filmmaker is the stuff that interests me, that influences the stuff that I make. And then I have a production company handle that is just pure content and like supporting other filmmakers. It does play into some of the political stuff that's in my work, but it's not overtly political. It's not specifically my voice, and it's sharing different content than I'm sharing. And all of my projects are hashtags. But anything long form that will have sort of a life cycle of its own, like my first feature is a kind of feminist horror film, and that's a very specific audience, whereas my production company is a little bit broader. I did have a handle for that, and I do keep it updated because it's like very horror-specific content, and it's very specific audience targeting. But that's sort of that's it. Like, I don't go beyond that because I'm managing this mostly myself. When a project is in kind of when I'm most working on a project, like I'm in production or when I'm releasing it, then maybe I have someone else managing that particular account, like my feature film account. But for the most part, it's just me. And so I try to, maintain activity across all three, but it would be way too much if I had multiple for every single one.
So when I'm working with filmmakers, I recommend that they have a Facebook page for the film, for sure, because I think that's kind of the broadest, and that's where you can build a community. And then I tell people, if they're at all interested in Twitter, they should be themselves on Twitter and change their art based on the project, because you can build up your Twitter or Instagram and or Instagram followings over time. It takes a long time to build those up. You have to put a lot of content out there, and if you had to start fresh each time, it'd be really, really hard and not time efficient. So I recommend, if you're starting out and you're going to have a long career who knows how long Twitter is going to be around, but if you're going to have a long career in filmmaking, then you should become part of the conversation, like you're saying, have an opinion. People like to follow people on Twitter. They like to hear opinions. They like to have the things that you share. I think that that's way more interesting, to have someone who shares their views rather than just, I made a movie. Like, those don't work. So you have to join and be part of the conversation, and to do that, it's better to do that as an individual. If you're not at all interested in Twitter, then sure, start a film account so that if you go to a festival and someone can find your film, that's fine. But it's not going to grow that much. It's going to be you have to be on Twitter to have it grow. And the same thing with Instagram. You have to use hashtags. You have to use all the tools, because people can't just repost easily on Instagram. People don't see other people's likes. It's way harder to build up a following. So if you're going to do it over a long period, pick the platform you really like and build a following on it.
Yeah.
And then use hashtags as films. And you have to pick that handle. So on your Facebook page, when you can create a name, you have the slash, then the name of the project. You want to be consistent and use that same handle wherever else you do it, as a hashtag or as a handle if you're starting a Twitter account for the film. You want to make it so that when you're on your postcard, you can say follow us at, and then just put the at sign with the name. So it's not like 3 different iterations of your movie title. Does that make sense?
Also,
or your personal title, yeah.
Something to note, Facebook pages, once you create them, and I think when they hit 100 likes, that's the name of the page. You cannot change it. On Twitter, you can change your handle. And so something that I'm planning to do in a few months is change my first feature handle into what I hope to be my third feature handle, because it is also a horror film, a feminist horror film. And so I'm not going to let that audience die. And I work largely in that genre, and so that kind of made sense for me. But maybe always have that in mind, because especially with short films, I assume a lot of you are young filmmakers making short films. At a certain point, you're going to be done with that film. And so if you're sticking with that genre, if you're sticking with sort of the themes that are explored or the general tone, then you could do that. You could roll over into the next project. But I really don't think it's wise for short form content that will sort of have the life cycle of a year or so.
But before you start a Facebook page, make sure you know what your title is, like you said, because it's really hard to change it. I think sometimes you can change it one time if you petition and it takes 2 weeks, but it's hard. So.
I'm going to ask you guys one more question, then we're going to take it to the audience. How much time do you guys put into social media, whether you're being hired by somebody to do a campaign, or you're doing it for yourself? I'm just curious, because it sounds like a lot of time. So just want to...
I think that crowdfunding is the biggest, and maybe you can talk about what that's like in a campaign.
I told her in the hallway, I was like, I've done a couple of crowdfunding campaigns, and every time I'm like, I can never do it again. It's just too much stress. It's a lot of stress.
Yeah, so during a crowdfunding campaign, the numbers are very different from just sort of general engagement and activity. For a crowdfunding campaign, you kind of want to have a balance between kind of being regular. You want to regularly update, and so that's maybe 3 times a day on the Facebook page of your project. But you yourself, you don't want to kind of overload your network with promotion. And so it's trying to find that balance. And so when I'm running a campaign, scheduling is my friend. You know, it's all about scheduling, whether that's actually like on Facebook scheduling content or using services like Hootsuite to schedule stuff on Twitter or Instagram. But really, engagement is everything during a crowdfunding campaign because you want to respond. You want to be able to respond. And so I always say it's really teamwork. It's like, okay, who's going to be managing the campaign on these days during these hours? That's why you really, you know, at Seed and Spark we have a phrase that's, you know, friends don't let friends crowdfund alone. And it's true that you need a team of people to effectively run an audience building crowdfunding campaign. You could maybe friend and family fund, and maybe that's what you do with your first campaign to sort of dip your toes in the water. But ultimately, the point is to have a team of people who are engaging an audience and building an audience. For yourself, like generally, if you're kind of in between projects or you're not yet promoting something, I say, you know, share something on some platform at least once a day to show that you're being you're kind of engaging. I think the worst thing is to sort of disappear from social media and then only come back when you're asking for something. And so I don't like to be glued to my phone all the time, and so I'll schedule stuff. Like, okay, you know, these are some articles that interested me today. I'll maybe say, okay, I'm going to spend an hour looking for articles that interest me, and then I'll schedule them to go out throughout the week. So I look like I'm engaging, but I'm really just like maybe taking a break, drinking some coffee. Maybe the one platform that I am most active on in the moment is Instagram, because it's like, oh, I'm writing right now, I should take a photo of that and like use the hashtag of whatever this title is and put it out into the world so people know that this thing will be eventually here. Maybe it's like 3 years away, but people can search back and see that hashtag 3 years earlier and see the work that went into it. But that's sort of, I try to think in that way, like, okay, what am I doing right now? How can I turn this into a post if I'm feeling like it? But really, it's all about scheduling.
And if you're doing a project and you're starting a film and you do start during pre-production, you start to build a page, you want to be active. You don't need to be super active, but you want to have fresh content up, 2 or 3 times a week, I would say, in pre-production. Just kind of keep them up to date about what you're doing. And this page will slowly grow as you start posting. When you get up to a point where you've finished your film, there's big announcements you want to make, those things, you can start, obviously posting more. And then the week before of release, I might, if I'm come on, that's when they usually hire me to come on board for like the month in the lead up, or 4 to 6 weeks around a release. It depends. You usually have, hopefully by that point you have a publicist who's helping you get content from out in the world, and then you want to share that, and you spread it out. I use scheduling all the time. You want to spread it out over time, but you could post as many as 3 or 4 times a day when you're in the week before you release, because that's fine. People expect that. I'm talking about on a page, not on your personal. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's why you want to capture those people over on your page, because then you can be talking to a captive audience who has signed up and opted in to follow your film. So you want to make sure. Can I just say one thing another platform that we didn't talk about and that filmmakers always seem to forget about, ironically, is YouTube. And you should also establish a channel for yourself on YouTube. That's what I recommend, either for yourself or for your production company. And then you can have playlists of your different projects over time. But it's just a really nice way to have a visual kind of resume or portfolio of your work, and you can put behind the scenes clips. Eventually you can always keep adding to it. But it's ironic that I think that filmmakers kind of forget about the film version. People love Vimeo. Filmmakers love Vimeo. The public is not there yet. So really, YouTube can be a great discovery tool for you. People go in, that's when you use those keywords lists that you've made. You put your metadata in. When people go in and search, you want them to find your project organically. And sometimes that happens. People go into YouTube and just do searches. YouTube search is also built in now to Google, so it's all part of the most giant search engine in the world. So you want to make sure you're there. You can be on Vimeo too, but don't only be on Vimeo. Always put your content on YouTube too, because that's where you'll find that organic discovery.
I agree with that. I have my content on my production companies both on Vimeo and on YouTube. I kind of use YouTube to track discoverability and see how my hits are, just sort of organically, like letting people find it through the tags that I'm using. Vimeo is where I drive traffic because I prefer it as a platform, and visually I think it's just like as a filmmaker, I think everything looks better. And so like that's where I'm sending people, and I can kind of compare numbers, like how much am I getting clicks through my shares versus just kind of naturally being there and people searching.
Another tool that I always use is Bitly. Sorry, so if you shorten, whenever you're sharing a link, I created a Bitly account, and I will create a Bitly, which is a shortened link. And if you have the account and you're logged in, you can see how many clicks each thing gets. And so that way, and you can see if it was on Facebook or on Twitter or via email, and you can see what nations it comes from. And that way you can kind of check to see what your audience is responding to and what they're not responding to. So I'm a big fan of, you just go to bit.ly.com.
It's also a good way, if you are asking people to share, or you're paying, a partner to share a video, a good way to see, what did that actually return. But I do want to get to audience questions. I believe there are 2 people with microphones in the audience. So let's get to those. Why don't we let's try start in the back. I see over there. Center back, and then we can go to her with her pen up next.
Do you have any advice? Yeah, that works. For digital release versus theatrical, because a lot of people we talk to focus on theatrical, and it's a lot harder to drive interest for a digital release, especially when press coverage is harder to get also for a digital release. So any advice would be awesome.
You can go ahead.
In terms of, you're talking about social media advice for each, I would say in terms of a digital release, if all of your energy is going into social media, and in fact a digital release is a better way to do it. Theatrical release, I can tell you a lot goes into making a theatrical release successful. Social media is in fact a big part of it, and it's becoming more and more. But even if you're releasing your theatrical release, you need to have, minimum, $100,000 to even have any kind of success. If you're talking about social media and doing a digital release, I think, you definitely want to build as much of an audience and awareness, leading up to that as possible. But I think one of the things that does get missed with the theatrical that you can take advantage of when you have a digital release is letting people know about your film, and then they can get it immediately. So really focusing as much of your budget when you're talking about advertising dollars or promoting your account to once it's up on, iTunes and Vimeo and whatever platforms you're using, because then, somebody watches, your trailer, or they see a recommendation from somebody, they can immediately go and watch it. And that is something that, you can't necessarily do with a theatrical release in the very, early stages. And even when you can, it's, here's this awesome trailer, go spend $18 at this movie theater. So it's a much bigger ask, and it requires a lot more, marketing to get somebody interested. So if you're doing a digital release, I would say in terms of social media, try to build up as much awareness once it's on the channel. And in terms of press, obviously harder to get press for a digital release because, press and media really hasn't caught up to the fact that the majority of films are released digitally, so it's definitely harder. But it's possible. It's, find those angles, find those stories. This angle isn't probably going to be X film is on iTunes this date. It's going to have to be, whatever issues or things that's challenging, and then it's also, using your network. You're here, at Barnard, is there a Barnard alumni network that could, help promote your film? You're asking your friends and family. In many ways, it's very similar to running a crowdfunding campaign. It's, getting everybody possibly who could be interested in your film based on your community network, the people in your film, people who worked on your film, the issues in your film, and driving them all directly to your film. And once it's in digital network, doing that stuff once it's on the platform.
But also, that's hopefully you've been building up an audience until then. So when you have this big announcement to make that it's on iTunes, you can make that announcement and then boost that post with $100 or so, and you target it. You can either target it to your fans and their fans, or you can target it to outside audiences, or you can do ads. I mean, you can do way more than $100, but that's just something that, example of when you would do a big boost and let it run for a week and a half or whatever it is. You also, if it is going to be on iTunes, you want to use that pre-sale period and try to get people to pre-order it, which is not as immediate gratification, but at least there's an action they can take. And that helps with your numbers on iTunes when you have, if you get early interest shown?
Yeah, when I crowdfunded my first feature, I was in post and on the festival circuit for 2 years, and then I was releasing it on VOD, and I really utilized the people that initially supported the campaign to kind of be my amplifiers for the digital release. And I prepped them like I had a date that we were going to go live, and so I told them, 2 weeks in advance, and really asked them to be on board to share, but also to write reviews on the platforms, and to just kind of be the people that recommend it to their friends, in like face-to-face, but also online. And also just like being as visual as possible in your shares, because the objective is to get a click-through. And so I would always try to be very enticing with what I shared. So it's like, here's 20 seconds of this, want to see more, you have to click this link, and that would lead to the purchase of the film itself.
And did the festivals that you went to help you too? Because I'm on the festival side of things, where I get those emails from people saying, hey, remember my film that played a year and a half ago at Hamptons? Will you push it? We're going out.
Absolutely.
So those are audience things you can take care of.
Yeah, reach out to everyone that ever supported you in the making of the project.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that too. I mean, there's no, it's a great question, and there's no hard rules because it's so project specific. But when you're talking about a digital release versus a theatrical release, you're primarily talking about a feature film. And even with the advent of social media, there's still this romantic ecosystem about having your film premiere at a film festival, having it play in a theater, and bringing people together in that community. But social media campaign is an essential part of any distribution strategy. So whether you're having a theatrical release or a digital release, you're going to want to build in a social media campaign, kind of similar to what we've been talking about anyway with the content calendar, a social media manager, a promotion budget, etc. I've had 3 films that have played at Film Forum, and that for me is my greatest achievement as a filmmaker. That's what I'm most proud of, that my films have played at Film Forum, not necessarily that they've gotten millions of views on Facebook. So that's my response to that.
Let's go to this next question. I think you had her pen up before in the black sweater. Here.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, for the crowdfunding for a soft launch before the crowdfunding campaign starts?
Sure. So if you're planning to run a campaign, a big part of, so for instance at Seed and Spark, we give you feedback on all your materials. We're the only platform that guarantees you one-on-one feedback on your pitch video and everything. And so I always recommend that you submit at least 2 weeks before you want to go live, but ideally maybe, a month, so that you can get approval and sort of schedule a launch date and time. And then what you want to do is start kind of hyping that date and time on social media, but also doing outreach to your core supporters. 90% of campaigns that succeed reach 30% in the first week. And so I always advise people to try to secure that 30% before you launch the campaign itself. So you send emails out to the people that will support you and say, hey, we're going live at this day and time. Can I count on you to give X amount, or how much can I count on you to contribute? And you really want to have a very personalized pitch for, it's not just like asking, but it's offering. Here's why you should care about this project. Something that I did in my last campaign, which was in February of last year, I did that sort of behind-the-scenes outreach through emails and through my newsletter, but I also, on social, was doing like a countdown. So when we were 2 months away, I shared photos, and I had a kind of clock ticking, and then we were 1 month away, and then we were 3 weeks away, and then 2 weeks away, and then it was like, okay, 7 days away, 6 days away, 5 days away. And it built a lot of hype. We, in the first 2 hours that we went live, we had a bunch of people contribute that weren't even the people that I had done outreach to one-on-one and email, because of the social media hype that I had been building. And so you really want to use that period, because once the clock is ticking, every second counts. In 30 days, it's a lot, but it's really not a lot. And so you want to use the time before to really prep your audience and be as exciting as possible. And yeah, I feel like the same way that film productions are kind of won or lost in the pre-production stage, so it's crowdfunding. And so you really want to, and it's all about collecting content too. So like, you don't want to be a week in and say, okay, we need videos, we're out of videos to share. You want to have that, you want to have a schedule, and you want to message test. You want to reach out to people. How does this sound? Would you click on this? Does this catch your eye? Is this interesting? And really test on the audience that you're targeting.
And also really research there's so many different crowdfunding platforms now. It can be quite confusing. So really looking into the different ones and what their parameters are. Like for instance, I have a project right now that's about women running for office for the first time. And I recently discovered a pretty new one called I Fund Women, which just feels like a very logical fit because of the project. And also because they have two different streams, which is flexible funding or fixed funding. And with flexible funding, you don't have to meet a goal in order to get it. So it's very important to keep those things in mind so that you don't feel tied by the rules of some of these funding platforms.
That's a really good point. Okay, why don't we pick somebody from this side? Why don't we go to him over here, and then after him in the white sweater, and then we can do you back there in this black and white stripe as third. So we just have a quick succession.
What is sort of your strategy leading up to a trailer drop on Facebook and on Instagram? Just like maybe like a month or so leading up to a trailer drop for your film?
I don't have an answer for that.
As I'm a big believer in adapt to the situation at hand, that there aren't any hard rules, but you have a certain window before your film comes out to build that excitement, and you want to make sure that you don't do it too early. You also want to make sure you don't do it too late. So I advise, a couple of weeks before your film comes out, start building that excitement, building your community, and just recognize that your initial audiences are going to primarily come from your network, from your peer network, from people you know, and really tapping into those people. I have what I call a social sharing tree, where it's like a group of people that I can count on to share stuff, and we've kind of talked about that already. So making sure that you get those people to share your trailer as well. I also, with a lot of the videos I make, not just trailers, but also with kind of the storytelling videos, like the one for Planned Parenthood, I make a 1-minute version and I make the real version so that I can use it on the different platforms.
There's also, if you are going to be working with a publicist, you don't want to drop it yourself without having them involved, because the publicist can sometimes get an exclusive on an IndieWire or Variety or some other kind of blog. So you want to make sure that you don't put it out there into the world before you have if you're going to have a publicist, wait till they're on board and give you advice to do that.
Yeah, or even if you're not going to have a publicist, I think that you can do outreach to blogs yourself and try and get some sort of exclusive premiere of the trailer, because that will kind of get you a bigger boost, and the specific audience that you're trying to target, they are looking on those sites already, and so it's not all on you. And so you want to do that work. And the same way I said with sort of a countdown for crowdfunding, you can kind of play with visuals in that way and entice people. Maybe you have a still. Yeah, it's all about teasing. So you have a still from your trailer, and it's coming in 7 days, or whatever it may be, but really enticing.
Let's put her in the white sweater.
Thank you. Good. Thank you so much for coming and speaking about this. Can I hold it? Oh, you? Okay, sorry. And I was going to ask you a boring question about algorithms, but actually if there's a place online you could recommend for us to go to understand the headlines, the breakdowns between how different platforms use algorithms, that would be helpful. I'd actually really like to know more about engaging versus sharing, and just anecdotally, what are the most unusual, maybe risky, bold things you've done to engage rather than doing sharing? So anything that would inspire me, because I've been very guilty of sharing and not engaging, being slightly scared of engaging sometimes. Thank you.
So not one of my examples, but something that we talk about in a class that we teach at Seed and Spark called Social Media Charm School. There's a web series called Distance. It's a really lovely web series that crowdfunded with us. And that is a web series about a long-distance relationship, and you see, each episode is kind of following. You can choose the perspective that you follow. So it's either, the man or the woman that you're following, and then I believe the episodes end in the same kind of video chat. But something they do really effectively on their Facebook page in particular, but also on their other channels, is kind of talking to other people in long-distance relationships and getting them to share their own stories. And so, like, on Valentine's Day, they were like, share a photo of we want to see more photos of long-distance relationships, so share your photo. And they got a ton of people who were sharing and then talking about, their kind of maybe struggles with having a long-distance relationship, but also how it's positive. And they're just really great at, like, engaging people and asking people to participate. And I think that that's something to check out. That's definitely one social media handle to check out. But it's kind of like that. It's like, asking your audience to participate in whatever the themes are of what you're exploring. Personalization is everything.
Right, and people will do what you ask. The people are sheep. They will do what you ask them to do. I mean, it seems so silly. But when we were starting out at Tribeca, we would just do, like, Scorsese or Allen, whatever. Like, you do a thing for the day, and people answer because they have an opinion they want to share. So really, just asking for people's opinions and feedback on things. I mean, if you have a poster and you're not sure which one you want to use, you could give them 3 choices of your poster and say, which one do you like most? And then they can be they're part of that process, like launching into the world. Or you could say, these are our rough drafts. Which direction should we go in? But again, using the topics and the themes is going to be key too. What's your biggest memory about XYZ? Yeah.
Right. On Twitter, I had a web series called Kelsey. It was an ensemble about friends in New York City, but what I think New York City really looks like. It was inclusive. And we would do polls on Twitter a lot. And so it's like, who's your favorite character? And people would get to see, how they align with other people and they got the results, or like, what was your favorite line from the last episode? And that was really effective.
And hashtags can be effective too. When you ask people to use the hashtag to tell you XYZ, those kind of things.
Yeah, you'd asked about the algorithms, and the thing is that they're constantly changing. Yes. And don't expect that these platforms are actually revealing the ways in which they're changing them. But Facebook recently announced that it's changing its algorithm, which in a way that decreases discoverability. One thing that wasn't included in this announcement is that what it then does is it gives more weight to paid promotion. So, basically they're turning into big advertising agencies. Instagram, it used to be that if you posted a particular time, that it increases your discoverability. That's not the case anymore. So you just have to be constantly adapting and recognizing that the rules aren't fixed. You'd asked about, like, the riskiest thing. There's a story that I have, which is the day after the Trump tapes came out in October 2016, I think it was. The director Liz Garbus called and said, "I'm going to do something about this." And we knew that we were kind of putting ourselves on the line a little bit, but we ended up making a social media film with survivors of sexual assault, splicing it with the Access Hollywood tapes. And we had no idea how it would land. We were lucky to have celebrities who then just at the end voiced their support for these women who were sharing their stories. And we said, we felt compelled, we were passionate to do it. We put it out there, and it exploded. And I think we need to bring that video back now. And it ended up getting like 4 million views within 2 weeks. And it was on CNN, on the Don Lemon Show. And so it's sometimes taking those big risks and putting yourself on the line can be the thing that ends up being the most fruitful. And it's unpredictable. You could spend years and years working on something, and it doesn't resonate. And we spent a week on that, and it did. But it did mean that we were trolled a lot as well, incessantly trolled. And that's something you have to prepare for, too, when you take risks with your work and when you do issue-based work, that people will come after you. And there are people that are paid to come after you.
And I'll just add...
So just have a thick skin.
when you're talking about social media, like lots of people have, many examples and you can find them online, but that's kind of what social media was made for in many ways, is taking the risks. So, you know your project the best. So what are the out-of-the-box ideas? When you talk about your trailer, like, they can give you examples of, basic things to do, but, you know your trailer the best. What is the most out-of-the-box idea that you have? And, how do you make that a reality? And it may or may not work, but a lot of the things that you see that do work on social media are because, people did take risks. So I would just encourage you guys to just, think out of the box about the ways in which you can get your content out there and, try it. That's a lot of, especially, on Twitter and Instagram, a lot of it is just, trying new things, trying a takeover. A lot of things that we consider to be, standard are somebody doing something, that the platform wasn't made for, that people didn't think would work, and it did work. So.
And you're storytellers, just remember that, and just think about telling your story using these kinds of tools. Don't be afraid of it. Just try new things, and it's ephemeral. It's not like, I know that social media lasts forever, but you're not going to make some huge error when you're trying these new things. Maybe you are.
I think we have time for two more questions.
Can I say one more thing about that? I also feel like for all my love-hate relationship with social media, it is like the most important witness we have right now. And I think about the Parkland students and how inspired I am by them, like every single second, that they are bearing witness in ways that the press and the media are not. And I'm really heartened to see how many filmmakers there are in the room and how many young filmmakers, because I really feel like you will be the truth bearers of our future. And it's very important because we recognize that, all this talk about fake news and et cetera, that's not new. Propaganda is not new. It's been around for decades and decades and decades. But that, you have the power to tell the truth. And that's very important, and not to take that for granted.
Let's go to you in the black and white striped sweater.
Thanks. Just two things, a question and then a comment. So something you guys said earlier, I immediately was like, that's changed, so I thought I would say something. You can change your username whenever you want on Facebook now, and you don't have to have any followers to do it. It's just like, it's relatively new, and I'm like, but the question I do have is, so if a film is, films at a festival, like any festival anywhere, what's your strategy for geo-targeting? Do you geo-target in that area? Do you geo-target where the, like United States? I'm like, what's your strategy for that when it's at a particular festival and you're trying to get some notice for the people who are actually at the festival?
Well, I think that you want to target broadly to build your fan base, but then when you're actually talking about the screening and the tickets on sale, you can target to that, geo-target to that 50-mile area, whatever, but then you can also target to keywords, depending on the festival, you target to people who like that festival, who like Sundance, who like Tribeca, so people who are film festival people, that's a way to kind of reach the industry people who might be coming in from out of town. So it's kind of a balance there. But you just want to build the bigger audience, and then hopefully the friends of friends of friends will see things too. So that's how, when you boost your posts, the friends of your fans will also see it, and that's a really way to kind of grow slowly but surely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think with any targeting, you want to do it specific to the project. So you can get really, really micro with Facebook ads, down to like interest, political persuasion, etc. Even like where they work. I had a petition that I did protesting the public theaters when they were stripped of their funding by Delta and Bank of America, and we were able to feed the petition into all employees of Delta and Bank of America on Facebook. So, there are things like that you can do.
We have time for one more question. I'm going to go to you in the hat because you've been raising your hand for a while.
Well, I have a couple questions, so I'll try to be really quick.
Just pick one. Yeah, and then, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask you how many keywords that you can use. But the other one was Dogs Against Romney. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but Dogs Against Romney was a Facebook page that just went crazy. And I was wondering, do you think that was because people were looking dogs and people were looking against Romney? Or do you know what I mean? Just like how were they kind of conceptualizing that? And
they were paying a lot of money to get people to see their...
They were paying, you think?
I mean, maybe.
And how many keywords can you put in there for anything?
It depends. You want to have a mixture of broad and narrow, and really narrow and finite. So when I'm trying to do a page likes ad in the back end where I'm trying to find new followers, I try to, you start plugging in keywords and it tells you what your number is. And I try to do between 5 and 10 million as my potential audience if I'm doing a nationwide campaign. So like you kind of play around with that. You don't want to just put documentary films because that's going to get you a zillion people and it's not specific enough. So you need to be more specific, but not so narrow that it's 5 people or 100 people, whatever. You don't want to do like feminism or right. You're a little more specific about it. But it's really a trial and error kind of thing where you just play around. And you can always change. You let an ad run for 3 days and then you come back to it and see how it's doing and then you make some adjustments. That's what I kind of do constantly.
So they don't have any music to play us off the stage, but we have to end. But really quickly, I just wanted to ask each one of you if you just had like one word of advice for everybody in the room about social media or something to think about as we exit. And then you want to start with Tanya first?
Oh, I have such boring advice, but it's be strategic and be fiscally responsible. Just really think carefully about how much a view is worth and how much paid promotion is worth, because I see people kind of go overboard.
I would like to be crowdfunding specific in this, in that, social media is really effective at brand awareness and kind of being a reminder to people who you've reached out to contribute to a campaign or rent your film or whatever it may be. But we actually only see a 1% conversion rate from social media shares to contributions towards the campaign, and that's across all platforms. And so the goal should really be to get a direct connection to the person. And so whether that's collecting an email address or using something like Green Inbox to message the people that are following you on Twitter or on Facebook. But the mission is really, your metric of success is not how many social media followers you can get, but how many you can convert. And largely that's about kind of having a personalized one-on-one direct connection to them.
One thing that we didn't really talk about was thinking about who your potential audience is in terms of just really spend some time thinking about that. How old are they? Are they men? Are they women? Are they all ages? And really then try to focus and communicate with those people. And the base word of communicate is the commune. You want to have this this community feeling where you're actually talking to each other. So it is social and just not that one way thing that we talked about.
Okay, so thank you guys so much. It was really, really helpful. I learned a bunch of tips me taking on, and thank you guys so much for coming, and best of luck.